Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video today, we're going to be taking a look at all the players that we all should be paying attention to for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers preseason Week 3 matchup versus the Houston Texans. But I am not alone in this video today. Joining me from our friends over at pewterreport.com, it is Matt Matera. Big Dog Matt. How you doing, man?
Big Dog Matt. What a nickname. I'm doing great, my man. How about yourself? Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, bro, thanks for being on. And for everybody who's just joining here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you're new. Hit the like button if you do enjoy these types of videos. And leave your thoughts about which players you're going to be keeping an eye on down in the comments section down below. I will also have links to Matt's Twitter account as well as the Pewter Report YouTube channel. Go subscribe to them if you haven't already. But Matt, let's not waste any time here. Let's go ahead and dive right into some of these players that I think, not just me and you, but everybody who is a Bucs fan or paying attention to the Buccaneers should be keeping an eye on. And the first two guys here, and this is going to be a little bit of an interesting situation, it's Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, right? These starters are expected to play the entire first half of this game. I want your thoughts on what in the world has been going on with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette right now.
It's been really interesting because going into this training camp, as you know, the Bucs brought literally every single person back. So it's very rare that you come into a situation that the Bucs are in where there's no questions across the board of who's going to be starting at what position. It's very rare that you see that. While it's pretty much 95% all set in stone, the one position that is still up for debate is starting running back between Rojo and Leonard Fournette. Now, on paper or digitally on Buccaneers.com, the depth chart says Ronald Jones is the number one. However, as Stephen A. Smith might say, in training camp and the first preseason game, it's been Leonard Fournette that has gotten the first snaps with the first team. We spoke to assistant head coach and run game coordinator Howard Goodwin the other day. Harold Goodwin. Might have to edit that out. Harold Goodwin. And he essentially said that Saturday's game tomorrow night is going to be very telling because both guys, in my opinion, no one's really kicked in the door to be like, hey, I'm going to be the number one guy. If we're really going to get down to it, Giovanni Bernard has been the biggest standout at the running back position. Is he going to be the starter? No, he's got that role as a third down guy, and obviously he's going to be great in that. So this is a huge opportunity. We obviously haven't seen the starters really play much at all in the preseason, and even in these joint training camp practices with the Titans, you're not seeing a ton of like heavy run plays. It's more geared towards the passing plays. So this could determine who is the starter for week one. Now, granted, both guys are still going to get touches and Bruce Arians will still ride the hot hand. I tend to lean more towards Rojo. I just think the Bucs offense gels so much better when he's in the game. Just the way he's more north and south and very downhill. I think it helps the offense flow a little bit better. Granted, again, the Bucs have an embarrassment of riches at many positions, including running back.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, it's weird. I don't think, granted, it's been designed this way, but Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, I don't think they have, more than 10 carries between both of them so far in this preseason. Maybe like 6-7 carries. Yeah. And just going through the process of training camp and these preseason games, there's been, I guess, more questions than answers, so to speak, right? Neither one of those guys has broken away in terms of like, this guy is the clear-cut leader here. Now, last year, it was a similar situation. They ended up going with Ronald Jones. Like you said, maybe they will do a similar thing. We'll have to wait and see with that. Ronald Jones, he was one of the best pure runners, in the literal sense there last year. I think he was like number 7 or number 9 in rushing yards. So that's something that you really shouldn't ignore, right?
Yeah, and Rojo would have gotten 1,000 yards had he not gotten COVID and gotten injured for the last game of the season, and then he got hurt in the postseason as well. You mentioned that Rojo was the starter for the beginning of 2020, but you got to remember Leonard Fournette didn't come to the team until training camp was done, and there wasn't any preseason games, but he signed with 1 or 2 weeks left before they went and played the Saints. So it was going to be Rojo the whole time, just because it takes a very long time for those guys to really get acclimated to an offense as complex and scheme heavy as the Bucs offense can be. So it'll be really interesting to see, even as soon as the first snap happens on Saturday in Houston, who's going to be the guy in the backfield there. We've seen both of them. It's, as far as the competition goes, it's the only one where it comes down to the starters, and it's going to be a lot of fun because for once we get to see the starters go.
Absolutely. And like you said, at the end of the day, whoever is going to end up being that starter, by, week 1 here versus the Dallas Cowboys, I don't even believe that'll be set in stone 100%. All these guys are still going to get their snaps. It's still going to be, that type of situation. A lot of what we saw last year during the regular season. This is just kind of going to decide who's going to be that initial guy to potentially be that hot hand initially. So it should be very interesting to pay attention to. 100%. We'll see what happens, man. They should be getting a good chunk of playing time there in that first half. Another guy, Matt, who I think is going to be worth paying attention to, and this came up very recently, this guy getting this opportunity. It's Jose Borregales. I mean,
Jose B.
Yeah, that's right. We've talked about him, off the video here, and just, man, this guy has been great. He's been nailing all these kicks, and he's now getting this final opportunity here with Ryan Succop missing this game due to being on the illness list. What are your thoughts on Jose Borregales right now?
Yeah, as you said, he's crushed it in training camp. I mean, I believe he hit I know Bradley Pinion tried a 61-yarder the other day. Borregales has hit from very far away. He's been very accurate, hasn't missed too many kicks. Now, granted, Bruce Arians always says, yeah, he's done well, but let's get him in a game. And he hasn't kicked in a game at all. He's done some kickoffs, but you got to remember, and it's not really his fault, the Bucs haven't given him an opportunity to really kick. That first preseason game, you had Succop in for the first extra point, and there was that whole debacle of kicking from the 2-yard line as they tried to do a fake special teams play. And then they went for a 2-point conversion to try to get closer into the game. And in the second game, the Bucs only kicked 1 field goal. Granted, it was a 49-yard field goal by Ryan Succop. So we haven't seen Jose B kick in an actual game. That's not his fault. Again, the Bucs haven't scored, but now it's all on him. As you said, Succop is not playing. He's on the COVID list right now after he tested positive after going out to dinner with a couple Titans players, and we all saw what happened with Coach Vrabel and Ryan Tannehill. So this is a huge opportunity. I mean, you could be great all you want in practice, but it's a different animal when you get to the game. I know it's preseason, but this guy is playing for his job. I mean, he could end up being a starter somewhere else because we saw the Saints had issues with their kicker. And that's exactly why you have to keep a kicker on the practice squad like the Bucs did last season. This is this literal situation of the kicker gets COVID, the kicker gets hurt, something like that. Obviously, he had a great career in Miami, but we saw another kicker in the ACC that went to the Bucs, and that didn't necessarily pan out. Trying not to bring up hard times for the Bucs fans because obviously they're still the defending Super Bowl champions, so let's focus on that. But yeah, this is a really big opportunity for a guy that is going to get some chances because you're playing a team that is expected to maybe win 1 game this season with the Houston Texans. So he should get his fair share of opportunities, and if he comes out doing well and hits all of his field goals or, hits at least 3 of 4, and maybe the one he misses is from 50 plus or something like that, he could really solidify his role as a player on the practice squad for this team.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. See, this is like my big tinfoil hat moment, right? Because I made a video earlier this week on the channel, Matt, talking about how, hey, maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could trade Jose Borregales. There's maybe some question marks about backup offensive line depth. It's not a lock that they're going to be able to keep him on the practice squad. Sure, you could still try to keep him on that practice squad, but you could potentially trade him, gain something, rather than just sending him to the practice squad and potentially just losing him for nothing. So, right after I made that video, Ryan Succop got on the illness list, and Jose Borregales...
Timing is everything.
That's right. And I thought, this is it. This is the great prophecy. We'll see how Jose Borregales does. We've seen some kicker-type trades, around the league this year, last year. Teams need kickers all the time at the end of the day. It's always a recycling, rotating type thing. I've been very impressed with Borregales. I know you have been as well. We've seen him in training camp together, man. He's been literally knocking it out of the park. And let's see if he can make the most of this opportunity. Like you said, game time action versus practice. Big difference for a kicker. You know, you've got guys barreling down at you that are on opposing team. They want to block it. They want to hit you. It's a lot of pressure there. Even for what would be deemed routine kicks, you know. So let's see if the young kicker here can make the most of that opportunity. And Matt, speaking of opportunities, another guy who's benefited greatly from opportunities from guys being out in practice and in games and things along those lines, it's Mike Edwards. He's the third guy I have on this list here that is worth paying attention to. Right now as it stands, Jordan Whitehead, I believe, is not playing in this upcoming game. Is that correct?
Yeah, he still hasn't returned to practice, although Bruce Arians has said that he's getting very, very close. So we'll see maybe next week as they start ramping up for the Cowboys. Maybe he'll be back by then. But no, he won't be playing in this preseason game.
Right. So, you know, Mike Edwards has looked great in training camp practices. He's been one of the most impressive guys on the defense, I think. He's looked awesome to the point now where even Scott Reynolds over at PewterReport.com has written like, hey, three
Big
safeties
fan
for the Bucs, you know, what's going on here? And that's something you guys have been talking a lot about on the website. So what are your thoughts on Mike Edwards, how he's been doing, and what potential opportunities he has now going into this upcoming game, being a starting safety here for an entire first half?
I think it's super exciting watching Mike Edwards, not just for what he's doing in this training camp, but his overall progression into the league. You know, he's been in the league a couple years now, but each year you see him getting a little bit better and better. And Bruce Arians spoke about how Mike Edwards is a ball hawk, and you can go back to the Saints divisional game where he was making big plays. He's the reason in the Super Bowl he deflected that pass that got Antoine Winfield Jr. the interception in the Super Bowl. He seems to always be around the ball. The issue for him really was that you have two really good safeties in Winfield Jr. and Jordan Whitehead that are ahead of him. Another thing that I've really looked into, and I spoke with Edwards about this during one of our press conferences during training camp, is at the beginning of this year's training camp, remember, the Bucs were depleted at safety. Winfield Jr. had a false positive, so he had to miss a practice or two. Obviously, Whitehead was still coming back from his injury, and he had COVID as well. Raven Green was a late addition to training camp. He missed the first couple days. So it was really just Edwards back there being a leader. You have to remember that he was a captain on his team at Kentucky where he played college football. So I asked him about, you know, have you taken more of a leadership role? And he essentially said that, you know, from being a leader and a captain from those Kentucky teams, the coaches already expect that from him, to be one of the guys to keep the room ready to go, and no matter who's back there. So I really think from a confidence standpoint, he's much higher up there than he has ever been in his career. Now he's getting opportunities that we saw a little bit in the NFC Championship game when the other safeties were hurt. He was able to go out and play. He's making big-time plays in training camp. Hasn't played a ton in the preseason, but that's the same for every single starter. I'm very optimistic for what he can do this season. I would love if the Bucs implemented a three safety situation where you put either probably Edwards or Winfield in the nickel position, because all three of these safeties they all do different things great. Like Jordan Whitehead is awesome. He's gotten much better in pass coverage, but his bread and butter is being down in the box, laying those hard hits that we all love to see. Again, the NFC Championship game when he forced the fumble on Aaron Jones. Winfield, again, great blitzer off the edge, running up the middle. He could do a lot in coverage as well, too. He's probably the best hybrid out of all three. And Edwards, as we said, a ball hawk, can make interceptions, can make big plays for this team. I think now that he's going to have so much more opportunity, and, you know, Whitehead is in a contract year, and obviously things aren't starting off great with him coming off an injury, and we'll see how he rebounds from that. But Edwards is in a huge opportunity here to really solidify himself as a starting safety for this year and next season.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting scenario. You know, Mike Edwards, he still has some years left on that deal, right? Jordan Whitehead, he's going to a contract year. He's going to want to get some money. The Buccaneers, I've said this before, I'll say it again, they can't pay everybody, right? So I could see a legitimate thing here where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are saying, what's life after Jordan Whitehead potentially going to look like if we can't bring him in? Well, Mike Edwards has been looking great. Maybe we get him started early into the starting rotation and kind of get him working through the process there alongside Winfield Jr., alongside Whitehead, and we see what happens there and we see what we got. And like you said, huge opportunity. He's looked great. He's always around the ball, like you said. He's gotten interceptions on Tom Brady in practice. That's not an easy feat, and he's done that multiple times. He really has been probably, would you say he's probably been the most impressive secondary guy throughout training camp so far to this point?
Well, another guy I was going to bring up who's kind of the ace in the hole for the Bucs would be Ross Cockrell. The fact that he's going from corner to safety. Now, I would say Cockrell's been a little more impressive just for the fact that he made that transition. And yeah, you might think, oh, well, he's still being a defensive back. Like, how different can it be? It's definitely different, especially when you're playing against the Bucs offense and the plays that he's been able to make. And I'm talking about pass coverage because he struggled a little bit in run coverage in the game, not being able to make the tackles. But I've really loved what I've seen from Cockrell in that standpoint. I would put Mike Edwards probably second. But another thing I just wanted to bring up real quick that kind of ties together too is with the fact that Whitehead could walk after the season and the Bucs can prepare with Mike Edwards for this year. What Tampa Bay did with being able to get everyone back is incredible. You may not ever see that again. And it's awesome that everyone wants to stay together and all the coaches are back. But let's just say hypothetically, and it's very likely that if the Bucs were to win again this season, eventually someone is going to take the bag somewhere else. And I would not fault anyone for doing that. But at some point, if someone's going to give you a lucrative amount of money, more money than any other team, you got to go do it, especially after 2 Super Bowl rings. And again, because they still got to try to sign guys such as Chris Godwin, Jordan Whitehead seems like the right candidate for, okay, he's going to get a lot of money to go play somewhere else. And so you got Edwards there. You got Cockrell as a solid backup, which also plays into like the other situations of keeping other new and younger corners after the big 3 corners that they have. So the Bucs got a lot of pieces to move with there in the secondary. But to answer your question, I would say Cockrell just from transitioning positions, and then Mike Edwards there as well. Yeah,
I think that those two, I would say, are the 2 more impressive secondary guys so far in this training camp. And at the end of the day, with Whitehead, he's still returning from his injury. This leaves great opportunities here for Mike Edwards. Matt, another guy who is returning from injuries, a little bit rusty, but he is working his way back into the process. A lot of people have been mad with him the past couple of weeks. It's O.J. Howard. And, I have O.J. Howard on here for a few reasons. He had a couple of bad drops in that game last week versus the Tennessee Titans. Great throws from Blaine Gabbert. Just O.J. Howard couldn't come down with him. He's still working back from his injury. Honestly, he's ahead of schedule if you really do sit down and think about it in terms of returning. What are your thoughts about O.J. going into this game and just overall the entirety of this tight end situation? Because I've even seen some national media people list him as the 3rd or even 4th tight end, and that is a little bit too much for me.
I mean, 4th tight end is just ridiculous for the fact that the Bucs might not even keep 4 tight ends. There is a very likely situation where the Bucs keep 3 tight ends and go with like 7 receivers if they want to keep Jaydon Mickens and make him the returner. Granted, the Bucs offense, they're going to be in a lot of situations where they go with 3 wide receivers, so they don't really need to have 2 tight ends on the same field. And if they do, they could just use an extra offensive lineman like they did with Joe Haig last season. He's obviously not here this year. But if you want to take Aaron Stinney or someone else like that, throw him on the end of the line, you could do that. You don't necessarily need a 4th tight end when those guys haven't really stood out a ton on special teams. But to go back to O.J. Howard, I really think, James, for him, I think it's more of a mental thing than anything else. And again, I don't blame him. I mean, that's a very serious injury that is not easy to come back from. But for all the issues he had in last week's game, he's a 1st-round pick, and he's going against 2nd, 3rd, and 4th string guys, and he's not making those receptions. So what's going to happen when he goes and plays against top-tier defenses, the number 1s on every single team? Like, he has to make those catches. I really think it's a mental thing with him. And Bruce Arians said after the game that he's got all the confidence in him. But who knows if Aaron's just saying that because he doesn't want to break him or if he actually feels that way. I still think that OJ can rebound, and I'm not saying he lost his confidence, but there's a little shakiness there for sure. This is another game that's extremely big for him. It's big for the Bucs too, but OJ is another guy that's in a contract year. The Bucs can still do their thing without OJ Howard, or if OJ Howard does not have a big impact on this team. They got all the talent at wide receiver, and you still have Gronk at tight end, and Cam Brate is very formidable, as we saw in the postseason, if he needs to step up if there's another injury. So it's OJ is definitely a guy to watch for sure, because he needs to step it up more for himself than anything that the Bucs need.
Yeah, I've seen so many different scenarios thrown out from so many different people, right? Not just in the Buccaneers community, and trust me, there have been a lot of differing opinions. But I've seen people say OJ's a candidate to be traded here. Oh, he's a candidate to be cut. And it goes everywhere with OJ Howard, right? Some people call him a starter, some people call him a cut candidate, some people think he should be traded, some people call him a backup. It's literally everywhere with the guy. Like you said, confidence things might be, I don't even want to say a concern. It might be something he's going through, right?
Yes.
Achilles injury is a big deal, and I think anybody could be rattled by that. And OJ's had a history of injury concerns, which, that'll wear on you after a while. So that could definitely be affecting his confidence to some degree there, right? And right now as it stands, I would still personally, in my opinion, probably peg OJ as that other tight end that would be out there with Rob Gronkowski.
So would I, yeah.
I think at the end of the day, his blocking has still been solid. He still offers a lot of upside as just a big, strong, athletic tight end. And I think the coaching staff will value that at the end of the day. How much do you think OJ will be out there? Do you think he will be out there with the ones in that entirety and then possibly going into the third quarter as well? How much do you think he should be out there?
I think he'll play up until halftime with the rest of the ones, because that's essentially what we saw with him for the last preseason game, because he was one of the few starters, I guess. I mean, second on the tight end group, but he was one of the few starters that actually played in the second preseason game. And that's another thing to factor in too, is that he hasn't really gotten a ton of reps with Tom Brady in games, because again, Brady didn't play in the second game and he only played on one drive in the first preseason game. So this is a big opportunity just to gain some more chemistry with Brady. I mean, as much as you work in training camp, remember, OJ missed most of last season, and so everyone else is already a step ahead of OJ just in terms of being on the same page with Brady, because they played the whole season with him. So not only is he catching up just from the Achilles injury and having to work as a blocker and as a receiver, but he's also trying to gain more ground with the quarterback, with the guy that's going to be throwing him the ball at the same exact time.
Right. I agree, man. So He's in a loaded situation, right? Not an impossible situation, but my goodness, he's got an uphill climb. And I think that there should be some level of, hey, just give him some time, take a deep breath. Let's take it easy on OJ here, because it is a tough situation. But I still think he will have some level of prominence here in this offense moving forward with the ones. Like you said, I expect him to play a lot in the first half, maybe a little bit in the third quarter, just to get him more reps, live game action. So we will have to wait and see with that. But Matt, the last two guys here that I have, we talked about uphill climbs for OJ Howard. These guys are in borderline impossible situations, and I have them on here specifically just for narrative purposes, right? It's Tanner Hudson and Ryan Griffin, and we'll see what happens. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they have to get down to 53 players by August 31st, and this could be potentially an end of a preseason type era for both these guys, because Tanner Hudson, Ryan Griffin, they're in really tough situations, and they haven't been looking great, and overall they are in possibly borderline impossible situations. So what are your thoughts on both these guys right now going into what is potentially their last preseason game here with the Buccaneers?
Yeah, love Griff and Tanner Hudson, both friends of the Pewter Report podcast and former guests, and have been on What's Cooking with the legend Mark Cook. For Griffin, I guess we could start with him. He knew the situation he was getting into. I mean, clearly you have Brady, and Gabbert was without question going to be the first backup. And then when they drafted Kyle Trask in the second round, I mean, that was essentially it for Griffin. I mean, I think he's going to be a practice squad guy, and they will keep him on the practice squad. But you're not going to give up on a second round pick. That's an investment. That's a long-term plan, long-term future with Kyle Trask there. Now, going into training camp, you could make the case that, if something crazy happened where Brady was not available and Gabbert was not available, you would call up Ryan Griffin and put him as the starting quarterback in that situation, just because he's a veteran. He knows this offense. He's only had like 2 snaps career in the NFL, but he's been there for a while.
Right.
But yeah, he's really faltered in the preseason games. I mean, that first preseason game was very ugly, and the second one did not go that much better. I mean, the whole team just in the second half just faltered. And I think a lot of that has to do as well with, it's not easy to be a quarterback in Bruce Arians' offense. I understand he's the quarterback whisperer, but it's very complex. It's very reading the defense savvy of, okay, if the defense does this, you got to throw it there, and the receiver has to stop and go and do this. There's a lot of different moving parts in that offense that takes an extremely talented quarterback like Tom Brady to really execute and master it. So Griffin, unfortunately, with the pick of Kyle Trask, his back was already up against the wall, and they're obviously not going to go with him over a second round pick that is just getting his feet wet in this league. Now, Tanner Hudson, Mr. August, as we all know, he's been having a solid preseason. I mean, both games he led the team in receptions and receiving yards. He had that crazy fumble that, he clearly hit the ground, and they call it a fumble. It wasn't a fumble. We all know that, but that's what the call was. The issue for Hudson, and we all know this, he's a great receiver, but Bruce Arians does not trust him at all in the blocking game. And for a 4th-string tight end, those are usually guys that are on the team to be an extra blocker, maybe in goal line or do something on special teams. Now, I feel like Hudson has been okay at special teams, but not a special teams guru that's like, oh, we have to keep him. Kind of like a guy like Pat O'Connor that's really carved out his opportunity. Obviously, he's doing great on the defensive line, but he's carved out a special teams role that has made the Bucs want to keep him. I think for Hudson, he's still got an opportunity to make this team because it's not guaranteed the Bucs are going to keep just 3 tight ends. But I don't think Bruce Arians has been overly impressed with Jarrell Adams or Cody McElroy, the other guys he's competing with for that 4th tight end position. I mean, we saw with McElroy, he had his opportunity on that pass from Kyle Trask, and it went off his fingertips. It was a catch. It was a little long, but he should have come up with the catch, but it turned into an interception. I think for Hudson, I don't know if he's, like in this one game, if he's going to do such a great job blocking that Arians is all of a sudden is going to be like, all right, he's fixed it. He's good to go. I almost think if Hudson has another good receiving game, but if he just has a type of game where he just knocks the socks off of everyone and goes out, makes like 8 receptions for over 100 yards and a touchdown, and just has such an incredible game that it makes it that hard for the coaches to cut him, I almost feel like that's his best route to make the team. Obviously, he won't be playing until the second half because the starters are going to be in. But unless he can really up his game with blocking tomorrow, I mean, they've gone in practice now for the media availability. We get to watch the first half an hour, and then they do all their installs and stuff. So we don't really know how he's done in the practice setting. And he's got one more audition for Saturday, but, he is Mr. August. So if there's anyone that could pull it off, it's him.
Yeah, like you said, both these guys are in incredibly tough situations. In the case of Ryan Griffin, I know a lot of people have soured on him this preseason. A lot of people, based on these 2 preseason games. Understandably so. I mean, a lot of people do want to see Kyle Trask. I get it. You want to see the young rookie, and Ryan Griffin's taken away snaps from him in a lot of people's eyes. Do you think Griffin could end up as a backup or a 3rd-string quarterback here for another team, just based on really just his longevity with just being a solid NFL vet type guy?
I actually do, because I think you got to look at a situation like Indianapolis, and Rick Stroud was actually talking about this the other day, and so I got to give him credit for that. Obviously, Carson Wentz is a very injury-prone guy, and it looks like he might miss the beginning of the season. I mean, their other backup quarterbacks. I believe they have Jacob Eason from Washington, and they have another guy that doesn't really have too much experience. Like, why not give it a shot with Ryan Griffin, a guy that's been around the league for a while and is still unproven? I mean, we've only seen him in the preseason. Like we said, not really at all in the regular season. It would have to be, again, a situation where the starter is hurt and you really don't trust your backup guy. But I do think there is a team out there that should take a flyer on him as, hey, he could be the second or third string quarterback on another team. It's just the Bucs at every position are extremely loaded, or have a investment in the future like Kyle Trask, where it just doesn't fit for a guy like Griffin here. I do think there is potential to go somewhere else.
One team that I have thought of more recently in the coming days has been like the Jets, because they don't have any veteran type quarterback. They have all young guys besides Josh Johnson, who they brought in. But you have Zach Wilson, you have James Morgan, you have Josh Johnson. I believe you have another young quarterback in there as well. Like, I think Griffin could help out a lot in terms of, I think that Zach Wilson and Ryan Griffin, they're similar builds. Maybe they play similar styles of quarterback.
Ryan Griffin's, I think, first of all, Ryan Griffin gets along with like everyone. So I feel like he would be a great mentor for a guy like Zach Wilson. That's a really good point there. Also, funny enough, James Morgan has a connection to Scotty Miller. They're actually both, I don't want to say like pretty good friends, but they are definitely friends. Scotty Miller was talking about that with us at one of our Celsius, when he was on the Celsius podcast. We were chatting with him beforehand. And so James Morgan played at Bowling Green with Scotty Miller. Yeah. When they were there at the same time. Then he transferred to FIU. But anyway, there's a little Bucs connection for you. But I do see Griffin with the young quarterback being a mentor would be really interesting.
Yeah, and then in the case of Tanner Hudson, like you said, we and I've been talking about this a ton, block somebody, anybody, somebody. You've regressed as a blocker. That's what Bruce Arians said in regards to Tanner Hudson. He doesn't make comments like that about a ton of players where he's that open. I know some people say like, Bruce Arians does that all the time. It's tough love. I'm just saying personally, I don't see a ton of that from time to time, so.
And it's no, and when he does, sorry to cut you off, but when he does, it's normally about like a starter or a guy that's going to have a lot of playing time. With Hudson, that's not going to be the case. I think we do have to remember though, he didn't make the initial roster coming out of training camp last season. Yeah. He started out on the practice squad. So I think that really could be another situation for him where maybe he doesn't start the season on the roster, but other injuries come about. They might have to call him up. And let's face it, the tight end room, Cam Brate's coming off an undisclosed injury. We obviously know O.J. Howard's injury history. And Gronk, thank goodness, was able to play every single game last season. But he's a guy that has an injury history as well, too, where if he got hurt, I don't think it really would shock anyone. So then after that, Hudson's the next man up. So while he might not make the 53-man roster, I think he's got a solid shot at one of the practice squad opportunities.
Yeah, but I will say this, much like in the case with Ryan Griffin, I could see another team going in and picking up Tanner Hudson to say like, hey, this guy could be potentially maybe not a starting receiving tight end, but he might be a second receiving tight end option for some team. Yeah. I could see that being a legitimate possibility. I'm not sure about all the tight end rooms around the league, but I could see that happening. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings, maybe the New York Giants, some team out there I think would say, hey, this guy's young. The Buccaneers had a loaded tight end room. They can't really do much about that. They had to cut somebody. This guy's looked great in the preseason, much like what you said about Ryan Griffin. Let's take a flyer on this guy. Let's see what he can do.
I could definitely see that, but also like he's been in that situation before. So it's like, well, if the Bucs just keep bringing him on the practice squad, if another team hasn't already taken him, like why haven't they done that yet? Now, granted, each season is different, and each season new teams. Well, it's all the same teams, but new players on teams, and they could have a different need. So I think Hudson is talented enough where he definitely could be an opportunity. But I think you can say that about a lot of players on the practice squad, because it's crazy because one team might need a ton of help at tight end. Another team might need help in the secondary. It's a very case by case basis type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair point. I do agree with that. So, Matt, we're going to go ahead and finish off this video. Guys, that's all the players that we think that you guys should be keeping an eye on here going into this upcoming game versus the Houston Texans. Again, let us know what players you guys are going to be keeping an eye on going into this upcoming game. Let us know down in the comments section down below. Matt, I want to thank you again so much for being on this video. Before we go ahead and sign off, do you have any final words?
Really, just thank you for having me on. It's been great growing our friendship over the past year or so. I appreciate it. Anytime you want me on. And it's going to be a very fun game on Saturday. Exciting times, still some good roster battles. I think the fourth inside linebacker between KJ Britt, Grant Stewart, and Joe Jones, that's another competition you should be watching. So thank you very much for having me.
Of course. And guys, as always, I will have Matt's Twitter account as well as the Pewter Report YouTube channel down in the pinned comment in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. And as always, we will see you in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.